Oh, it's just stuck.
Yeah. Hey Mo,
Hey, Ricky.
the doctor is in.
Yes, yes, we are. And it is the start of National Caregivers Month.
Yes,
Is that
National
correct?
Caregivers Month. That is, it's Caregivers Month. It's all about caregiving and friendship. For Links, it's Friendship Month and all the good things about love and care. And I really need a doctor today because I'm really sick. So
Oh,
I know I have
well,
like
I care about you and I want you to prioritize your wellness. So, who's your caregiver when you're feeling sick?
I know I made my own chicken soup yesterday. So and she really sent me chicken soup. You know, she's my Jewish mother. Sent me chicken soup to my
I
doorstep.
love it. Reverend Diane, it sounds like we need to talk about some caregiving
Yeah.
and how to source good caregivers and how to support good caregivers and how to be good caregivers and how to receive care. So we got a lot to talk about today because those are
Okay.
all the elements of caregiving, right? Because, I see so many patients who come in and their spouse may be overly supportive and a little bit, too toxically optimistic. We're going to get through it. We're going to fight. And the lady's like, you know what? I just want to feel what I feel. And I feel lost. I feel sad. I feel devastated. And let me have my process. And it's shutting down sometimes that caregiver. And so there's a lot of dynamics that I want us to talk about. But
Yeah.
first, I want you to introduce yourself. And then I want you to tell us your why. How did you even get into this field?
Well, I'm Reverend Diane Smith. I am Director of Ministry Engagement and Chief Diversity Officer at Angela Hospice in Livonia, Michigan. How did I get into this? Well, it's a long, circuitous story, but I think the most significant thing that happened to me was I experienced the death of my fiance when I was 22 years old. And
Mm.
when I was not going to do what I was planning to do, which was to get married, on the one hand, it was an incredible loss. And on the other hand, it eventually opened a door which allowed me to do anything.
Mm.
And so one thing led to another. I was in graduate school at the time. I became a speech therapist. I did that for a while. But I had a friend, a kind of mentor, who was like a grandmother to me in a way. And she had traveled around the world representing my denomination, and that's the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. She'd traveled around the world serving as a goodwill ambassador. So this was an African American woman from Mississippi who eventually became the goodwill ambassador for this denomination, which was not predominantly Black. And I met her while I was a speech therapist, and she was in retirement. She'd returned to Mississippi, and I was raised in Mississippi, and that's how I knew her. That was one way, and the other way was through the denomination. And she talked to me about her experiences in missions. And I guess I should have prefaced all of this by saying when I was about 8 years old, I remember thinking one night that working for the church must be the most wonderful thing in the world. But of course, I
Wow.
got older, fell in love again. You know how, your life changes and your focus changes. Well, here I was at 20, see, he died when I was 22. Then when I was involved with her, that was about 24 or 25. And here I was sitting with a woman who was talking about work that I thought was incredibly inspiring, and the light went on. And I applied to be a missionary for several different denominations. And in the end, my own denomination chose me, and they decided where I would go. And that sent me on a path doing something I never imagined I would do, which was being a missionary. And I was sent to Japan. And in Japan, missions was educating Japanese women, opening schools and educating women. And the thinking was if you influence the women, maybe you could convert the country. It didn't work when it started. It has never worked the way they planned, but I ended up teaching at a junior college for Japanese women. And when in my third year, thinking about the fourth year, the question was, well, do I stop now and go back to the United States, or do I stay? Do I sign on for more years? I had a friend, see, I told you it was a long story. I had a friend who was a jazz pianist in a
But
club.
so good though, right? So good. So
He
a
was
jazz pianist, yeah.
a jazz pianist in a club. And he decided he'd met the perfect Japanese woman. He wanted to marry her. So he returned to LA, which was his home, to put things in order. And I didn't think anything of it when the time grew longer. But one day, I'm still in Japan. One day I received in the mail a very beautiful envelope, incredibly beautiful stationery, but I didn't know who these people were. I opened it, and it was an announcement that told me he was dead.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I had been praying for the answer. Do I stay or do I go? And I said, I hear you, I'm out. I returned to the States, went to seminary, finished my degree, and I was ordained in the denomination. And I'd worked during seminary with women in the criminal justice system in Boston for a year, and then back in California, which is where I was in seminary, in Claremont. I was working with women and children who were homeless. But I wasn't clear about what my direction was going to be next. I was having a conversation with a schoolmate of mine from seminary. She'd graduated a year ahead of me, and she asked me in a conversation, well, what are you going to do next? And I thought, I'm not sure. And she said, well, there is an opening at one of the hospice offices. And when she said that, the light went on. And I said, wait, oh, wow. And that led to my work in hospice. So that's how I got to hospice.
Wow.
That's what I say, telling you the story. Wow. I mean, that was an amazing experience, kind of floating along, trusting that the journey would get me where I needed to go, and it did.
Mm.
And what I
Well,
will say about that, the last thing that I'll say about that is many of us in hospice have had some kind of experience with death.
At an
And
early age, maybe at an early age, like you did, right?
at an early age or something. It could be the age, it could be the experience, the connection, whatever the relationship was. So that is a very, very common experience of people who are working in hospice, no matter what the role.
Wow. Well, interesting you say that too, because I've had probably, I don't know how many experiences with people working in hospice, and they are just huge hearts. I mean, we're so blessed to have so many lovely, wonderful people in our breast cancer community, but hospice people have been just so warm and loving and caring,
Good. Good.
selfless and just amazing.
I feel like though hospice sometimes gets a bad rap, just like palliative care does in our community. And I want to unpack that a little bit in
Okay.
terms of helping people to free themselves of that sense of as if it's a failure almost,
Right.
right? And
Right.
and how do we get there, and how can we pivot from that mindset?
I think education. I think the most important thing is having an understanding of what hospice is, um, understanding that it's definitely not, in our estimation, it's not giving up so much as it's shifting. And it's shifting in the kind of care that you want. The other roadblock can be physicians who are insisting that you continue to try beyond what they even may understand as appropriate steps given the diagnosis. Have you ever seen the film Being Mortal? It's a documentary, Being Mortal.
I don't think I've seen that one, no.
It's a documentary. The physician in it is Atul Gawande. He is, you know him. Do you know him?
Oh yes, I'm very familiar with the emperor of all maladies, et cetera. Yes, yes.
So he did a documentary, and the basic message in this documentary was that sometimes physicians are not honest with their patients. He realized that he was someone who was asking his patients to take the next step and the next step, and he knew there was no next step, but he didn't know how to communicate the truth with his patients. And so this became an important step that he actually came to understand the significance of, as his father was diagnosed with cancer. This is his father, the physician, and he and his mother who was a physician, did not know how to communicate with Dad, the physician, about his disease process, about the steps he needed to take. And Dad finally became able to communicate to his family what his wants were, where he wanted to be buried, for example, where he wanted to return to his father and mother had come to the States separately from India. He, Dr. Gawande, had been born in America. I believe that's right. But his father had specific ideas about what he wanted. And so part of the documentary is about the journey the family went on with his dad. But a bigger part, and an incredibly impactful part, was Dr. Gawande's search to find physicians and their patients who were willing to share their stories to help Dr. Gawande understand what it was to be the physicians and what it was to be the patients and their family members. A very impactful film that actually helps people understand more than anything else that the physicians may not be able to communicate the truth that they know. And so the patients need to be aware, have an education about what they need to ask for, what they need to be prepared to communicate around when they are ill. That's a tall order. That should not be the patient's responsibility. But patients, I think, and physicians need to have education about end-of-life care so that patients can make informed decisions about what they want, how far they want to go, and what they don't want.
Yeah.
It's so true. You know, I say there's a difference between preserving life and prolonging death, right? I
Yeah.
tell my patients
Yes.
that there's a difference.
Yes.
And, you know, what I put in a comment was that, you know, that hospice can be enveloping. And what I mean by that, and hopefully you can elaborate, is that we don't always tell people what to expect when they're on chemo. We send them home with some medicine for nausea. We send them home with, you know, some steroids so that you don't have a reaction. But you don't know, are your bones going to ache? Am I going to have chills? Am I going to? And in hospice, I feel like there's so much thoughtfulness about what a person might experience, and they really try to prepare the whole family and the whole ecosystem. And
Exactly.
it's not just take this medicine and then, you know, we'll see you back in a week and we'll recheck your labs. It's like, no, you may have this. Here's what to expect. Now, yeah, and there's this sort of maybe talk a little bit more about some of the conversations that happen in families that help them to feel more supported in hospice, because I think that is a common experience.
It is a very common experience. And what's really true about a hospice sign-on, for example, is whoever is involved in that sign-on, they're only hearing so much. We may be telling them what they need to know, but they can't take it in. And that can be the patient, that can be the family members. And so it's a process. The whole journey of considering hospice, signing on to hospice, and then experiencing hospice is a journey. And the grief that we often feel is that the journey may happen so close to the end of life that the experience of supporting the family may not be fully realized. And so the journey is that we would talk to someone who's considering hospice about where hospice takes place, who provides the care. We give them options about the team they want to have. The medical director and the nurse are requirements. Some people decide, I don't want the social worker, I don't want spiritual care, and spiritual care is a paid role of the hospice team.
Really,
And
really.
yeah,
Wow.
it's a paid role. They, in their wisdom, the legislature decided, the government decided that the doctor, the medical piece, the social work, psychosocial piece, and the spiritual piece would be covered as part of the hospice benefit.
Awesome. That's awesome, right?
And so we explain that, but people aren't necessarily able to keep that information, hold on to that, or even take it in, because they are so overwhelmed by the recent diagnosis and all that's required in providing care. I remember, I think we'll be talking about this later. I'm the director of a program that helps people understand about end-of-life care in the Black community. And I remember the first group I worked with, the project was already underway. The first group that I was involved with, a woman was there for the training. And we asked the whole group to introduce themselves and if they'd had an experience with hospice, to share that experience. And she said, well, I took care of my mother in my home, but I did all the caregiving. I don't know what we needed hospice for. So she had not heard them when they said that hospice is provided wherever home is for the patient. And if it is in the home, as opposed to a nursing home or assisted living, for example, if it is in the home, then the family is responsible to provide the care. The family or a support system, whomever that is, they're responsible for providing the care if the patient is unable to take their own medication and do things for themselves. At the end of the training, and it's 2 hours, 4 sessions each, it was only as we finished the training that she said, because that first session, she was angry with us, but she showed up. But by the end of the last session, she said, now I understand. So to get back to where we started with this last question, it's a question of education. Having the information you need to make an informed decision about hospice, as opposed to you get the information, here's someone to sign you on, and you're running with it. I think education is the key.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I want to back up though, because before hospice, many times comes the long and difficult road of being a caregiver, right?
Yes.
And there aren't a lot of rule books that people are aware. Maybe there are now, but I remember watching, my grandfather was a caregiver for my grandmother, and you know, many days he would be struggling to see, trying to draw up the insulin. He can't see and she can't see. And, you know, other days he would be trying to make sure that he cooked something for her, or he would, you know, some days she just wanted a bear claw. She was a diabetic, brittle diabetic, and he'd go get her bear claw because that's what she wanted. It would make her feel better. And
Yeah.
he got thrust into this role of being a caregiver without really
Yes.
understanding what it meant. And I watched other
Yes.
family members burn out becoming his caregiver. And I want to talk
What
about
happens, I think that's what happens, Mo. You get
yeah.
thrust into this role, because even when my mom fell and I had to move in with her, I was thrust into that role. I didn't choose
Right.
it.
Right.
Mhm.
I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
Take on me as a person, but
Well,
it's
what should happen? What should, and whose job is it? You
Right.
know, in terms of helping to prepare caregivers, is it the job of the surgeon? Is it the job of the nurse? Is it the job of everybody? Is it the job of an advocacy group? Like how can caregivers feel more informed when, you know, it starts out as one doctor's appointment and now it turns into a whole chronic issue? Because that's how it
Right.
goes, right?
Right. 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 And I think again, it's education. We are at a point in healthcare now that people are expected to live far longer than they ever have before. So those of us who are baby boomers will need an incredible amount of care. We know that. We know we're baby boomers. So it's our responsibility to
for it.
get information about what it will mean. At least this is not hospice talking. This is Reverend Diane talking now. It's our responsibility to understand what it will mean and to make provisions for people who may be responsible for our care if a time of caregiving comes. So we have to be, at this point, we have to be aware that things can change, and we need to think about what we want done, who we want the caregivers to be. We need to have those conversations. And we dodge those conversations, but we cannot, I mean, there are too many of us. There are too many of us for people not to be prepared with conversations about our care when we can no longer care for ourselves. There are way too many of us to wait for that to happen.
And it's
So
also
I guess it's
money
up.
too. You know, I guess it's about money too. And you know,
Oh,
you
it
think,
is.
what can I afford? What can my mother afford? And stuff. And
Exactly.
my
Exactly.
this, but I think you're right. It's definitely, you know, a conversation that I don't know that families, we know Black people, we don't talk about health in general.
I know.
And we're not talking
So we sure don't talk about death.
about, so we're
I
sure
know.
about
I
that,
know.
right? Until we're
But it's at this point, the writing's on the wall. I mean, the writing is truly on the wall. They've been talking about this baby boom surge. Here we are.
Yeah. Well, you know, my fiance's mom died. It's been a year now, but she was told in May that she had 3 months to live, colon cancer, and she died in August, almost to the day the doctor said she would die. But even in those 3 months, there was no talk about any kind of.
I know.
It was all about what can we do? Can we give her drugs? Can we do it? I mean, she wanted to do chemo, and that made her sick. She had, you know, she had a congestive heart failure, and you know, but there was no talk about death.
Right.
Still, he died. It was still okay. Well, now what do we do? You know, and I planned the funeral. I did all the stuff for them because I could see they were incapable. My fiance and his sister were incapable of doing that work.
Right.
And there was 3 months to think about it, talk about it, plan for it, and even make a will, which they didn't. You know what I mean? Like even stuff like making a will, you know, should be part of education. And it was really hard, and I see that happen all around in families, you know. But
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, I think one of the best questions that doctors can learn to ask is, what do you want to happen here? What are your wishes? And so in addition, when I meet a patient for the first time, I always ask them, what do you understand about what's going on?
Right,
right? And then once we
right,
clarify what the situation is, then the
right,
next steps are, well, what do you think we should do about it? What are your thoughts on what we should
right,
do? What do you want to see happen?
right,
Especially if somebody has advanced disease that probably is going to be terminal, you know. And there's a thin line as a doctor between, you know, encouraging people to consider hospice versus considering treatment, right? Like
right,
and nobody, there's no class that I've ever attended in medical school that helped us to
right,
know when enough is enough. It's a
right,
partnership with the patient. And for us to bring it up may also feel like defeat for us. You think it feels
exactly,
like giving up as a patient.
Right,
Imagine how it feels as the person who's supposed to save a life
right,
to say,
exactly.
you know what,
right.
maybe
Mhm.
we should stop. This isn't working and your body is deteriorating and your quality of life is declining, you
Right,
know?
Right,
right.
right,
And it's a hard thing, not just for the doctors. And I think that's why we don't bring it up because we don't want to seem like we're not doing everything. We want
right.
to be the savior.
Right.
We want to save the life. And we don't want patients to ever think that we've given up on them. But, you know, the flip side of that is exactly what you said, Ricky, more treatment, more treatment, more treatment. And it's
Yeah,
like, okay, is this doctor trying to make money off me because, you know, they want to put me on another drug? And I think it's intent versus impact. I don't think that's how
Right.
we intend for it to land, but it
The
does.
other thing is in our community, it's often the case that we feel if we give up, we are not making room for the miracle.
right, 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 right.
The doctor
Yeah,
is
we'll get,
not
yeah,
God.
right, right, right,
Say
right.
that again, because I always
Yeah,
tell
that is
patients
so
that,
compelling. I'm gonna
right?
say it again.
Right, right. Oh,
Are we
yes.
giving up on the miracle?
If
Give it up.
we give up, we are not making room for that miracle to happen. And
Wow.
we have, when I was working at the
That is so
bedside,
huge.
yeah, when
Mhm.
I was working at the bedside with patients, um, and they were dealing with this question of um, giving up or what am I supposed to do, or then I let them talk about, you said that you asked patients what do they want to do. I ask patients, and I know there are physicians who also ask, what are you hoping for? What are you hoping for? Which does not mean I'm saying that nothing can be done, so much as it gives them an opportunity to talk about what they are hoping will happen. And even in those conversations, they often come to a realization about, or an acknowledgement, more significantly, an acknowledgement about where they are and what is possible. So just opening the door, your question and this hope question opens the door to what they usually know is true.
All right, Reverend Diane, I got a question for you because that question to me, if you say, what are you hoping for? You know, and what if the answer is I want to live?
Uh-huh.
And living, of course, is not how anyone gets to whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all got to go through that threshold to get to whatever. If you believe that
Right.
something happens next, if you believe that nothing happens next, there's a threshold that we all must cross at some point. How do you answer that? And how do you sit with that when someone says, I hope I live longer. I hope I can live.
And ask them, and what does that look like?
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Just
yeah, yeah,
get them to talk about, because they understand that something's not right. They understand that something isn't right. So get them to talk about what they want, what they're hoping for, what it looks like if they're willing to discuss it, and let them guide that conversation. And you just open the door more and more to get from them what they are wanting in that life. And you
yeah,
don't have to shut it down. You
Right,
might
right.
get a chance to have another conversation, but
Mhm.
people will often come to the realization
right.
somewhere in the conversation that I know this this is coming. I would imagine you've had those conversations where you started with what do you want, and they ended up telling you, I know something's wrong.
Well, though, I think what happens is that because something's happening with them. So like I'm thinking about Allison Mo,
Mhm.
and, and she was in just debilitating pain, just
Mhm.
debilitating pain, and the pain overcame her. You know what I mean? I think when there was no way when there was no way to solve for the pain is when she said, okay, I'm done. And I think it was just like there's a symptom or something that's saying, okay, I can't do this anymore because,
Mhm.
and even when she wanted to, succumb to it, I was like, no, 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 we can't, we got to fight like girls. We're going to fight, 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 and I couldn't let her go. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But I think I think so many of our cancer patients have pain or something that's really restricting their life, their quality
Mhm.
of life that says, okay, but still, when do you make that call? I think for Allison it was pain, but it's so hard because, like I'll find another drug, I'll find another thing, I'll find another way to fix it,
Mhm.
but I
And
think,
you're right, Ricky, in that how do you know when enough is enough, right? That especially when you're in pain. Um, and Rev Diane, I hear you saying to leave the door open just for the conversation. Like it's okay to not know the answer, and
Right.
and or to know that the answer is still terminal.
Mhm.
But I guess the question is, and I probably know the answer, but people watching might not. If you go on hospice and you decide for some reason to come off,
Mhm.
right? Is that an option? If you go on, does that mean you have to stay on? What if you change your mind?
yeah.
Yeah, no, hospice is a patient-driven care provision. So the patient or whoever is making the decisions, they make a decision to be in hospice. They can decide any day, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back to curative care. I want to try another treatment. I want to see what else is out there. So that is not something that is forbidden. People are free to get off of hospice and to come back on later if it is appropriate in the future.
Mm.
Right. And studies show, I'm going to put one in the chat that people can actually live longer when
Yes,
they opt for hospice sooner
right,
because their palliative needs are met, right? We stop
right.
taking a medicine that makes you have mouth sores so you can't keep anything down, right? We stop giving
Mhm.
you diarrhea, right? We've given you a
Mhm.
chance to spend time with your family, eat the foods that you like, breathe some
Right.
fresh air, and not be in constant treatment. And
Yeah, eat
people
that
actually
bear
can,
claw.
yeah, right. It can
Yeah,
listen. She wanted it, and you know what?
exactly.
And so there's some good data surrounding this, but I think it's important for
Yeah,
people to know just because you decide to consider hospice doesn't mean that that's it for you in terms of you not being able to receive treatment again. And
exactly.
Yeah.
yeah, and that is a really key point because we do tend to look at it as this sort of failure and
Mhm.
like the people in the chat here, we got some
Yeah.
good
Some really good comments here in the comments,
comments.
right?
You see them, Ricky? You want to shout out a couple of
Yeah,
them?
let's see.
You know?
We just had the last one that Kofi Robertson said I work with people living with HIV. I've seen many of my patients go into hospice. I've also seen the hospital perform miracles.
It's
Mhm.
So,
so you always leave room for the miracle. Somebody
Right.
mentioned death doula, and I want to talk
Yes.
about that
yeah.
concept of having a doula, an end of life doula, I should call it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Can you tell us
Mhm.
what that is and who that is and how does somebody become one?
I think there's training for the doula role, but a doula is someone who is basically almost providing palliative care. It's almost like someone taking the journey with you who knows what to expect and who can help prepare you for what's coming. So a doula is comfortable with the process. They're not going to fight you. They're not going to force you to do anything. They understand the process and they normalize the patient and the family members' feelings about the process. Today it's okay. Tomorrow I'm pulling my hair out, running down. What is it? What is it? I'm running down the street naked with my hair on fire. So the doula is someone who is actually able to engage with you more frequently even than the hospice team, because they are contracted to deal with you and to shepherd you through the process. So there is training to be a doula, and they are not family. So this is a professional role. They are not family, and they also set boundaries, but they are there to be a support system to the patient through the process.
Right. Wow. It's a lot. It's a lot. As we were jumping on, Mo, you saw this earlier. One of our good friends, Jersey Baker, one of our breasty friends who we adore. And actually I had interacted with her this morning. We were texting back and forth, and she just said, I've just been, sent to hospice as we were getting on this call. And I want to see how she's feeling. But I know she's been fighting like a girl for a long time. I think she's been metastatic for about 11 or 12 years, right?
Long time, long time. Still doing the runway, still traveling, she gets around more than more than most.
I know.
And did not let cancer stop her nor define her journey. And nor will hospice, and nor will this, right? This is all part of a very intricate fabric. Jersey, if you're watching, we love you.
Love you so much.
Absolutely, we support you. We're here for you. And
what's true about people is, if they are fighters, that's what they do. You're not going to stop them. You're not going to change them.
Right. No.
If they are the kind of person, if their personality is such that they acquiesce and they go gently through the process, that's generally how the process goes for them. But fighters fight.
Yes,
and they are miraculous. What those girls do it is miraculous. Fighters fight. And so I think it's important to even have that in mind, to understand that fighters fight. And other people who are not fighters may not fight. It's just their way. But those caregivers may be the fighters who are fighting, and the patient has decided it's enough. And when fighters stop fighting, then they usually go down.
You got to listen to that. You got to listen to that. Mo had to go take a call from the hospital real quick. But it's almost like, though, we talk about, we educate women. That's what we do.
Yes.
We educate about clinical trials, about their risk cancer and all
this
stuff.
And yes.
I can't change all the bad things in the world, but I can help Black women be informed about all aspects of cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it always it boils down to what we talk about as Black people.
What we talk about
with our families, and
yes,
how we talk about cancer, how we talk about cancer risk, how we talk about genetics, how we talk about history, and we don't talk. And so a lot of our encouragement is this, and to me, this needs to be on our list. Here's what you have to talk about. How do you prepare your family for this, for caregiving, and we often fall into these caregiving roles because it's our mom.
Exactly.
Or it's someone that we love, and who else is going to do it? Like,
exactly.
My mom got there was no choice. I was the one, you know what I mean? Still she's doing great, but I mean, I had to learn that I was not the person to do this work and hire a caregiver. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't good for either one of us.
Right.
It wasn't good. It wasn't healthy for either one of us. And I know, and I have this amazing caregiver. She's my wife. I love her, my Millie. But I know my mom is in better hands with her.
Yeah.
And now it's my mom and my stepdad, then I could even give her. So I give in a different way. You know what I mean? Whereas Millie's there every day with, in the trenches, doing all the stuff, picking up the wheelchair and making sure she has her food and all that stuff. So now it's a lot better, but I mean, we're blessed to be able to have that situation. Because for that, right? So so many of us aren't prepared, and we just sort of fall into this role, and it's so hard. It's so hard.
Yes.
When you love decline.
Yes.
I have one of my best friends. They're 40 4 kids in their family and their mom has Alzheimer's and they're working together and watching their mom decline is just so hard. And making these decisions for their mom who can't make them for herself
Right.
is hard. So I think that's
Mhm.
it boils down to what you said. And that's talking about it and preparing
Yes.
for it. And way before you need to talk about it, like genetics, way before you need to even deal with the clinical, you know, we need to be talking about these things. It's almost
Yeah. Yeah.
like even just having a will, you know?
hmm I was about to say, part of the training we do in the project that I do is one session is about making those end of life plans, not for hospice or for palliative care so much as having conversations about what you want, who you want to be your power of attorney,
Right.
for example, who you want to make decisions for you when you can't make them. And
Right.
COVID was a difficult, well, has been a difficult season. But one thing it taught us was we need to talk about these things before we're in a situation like the ones that over and over again we heard about. The patients in the hospital, the family can't get to them, and the family gets the phone call. We've got your mother, father, husband, wife, whomever on life support, and they aren't going to survive. What do you want us to do? And
Right.
so the family's caught off guard,
Right.
unable to
Right.
make a decision because they don't know
Right.
what they want.
Right.
So we have just gone through a season of examples of people who had not made plans, who had not talked about it, and suddenly had to make an uninformed decision. We
Yeah.
don't want that to continue if we can help it.
Right.
I remember having I have a nephew who's in theater, and I often go to see him in plays. He's not a professional. Well, he's a professional, but he's no star. But he's my nephew, and so I go to see him when
He's
he
your star.
does
He's your
this
star.
and he does that. So he was doing some work in Atlanta. Atlanta is his home, and I decided that my husband and I had done our wills and we elected our power of attorneys. So I decided I needed to tell my brother and his wife, I needed to tell them what my wishes were. And I needed to do that because in the case my husband dies before I do, then my brother would be my power of attorney then. He would be the next in line. So we went to see my nephew's play. And while he was finishing, changing clothes, taking off makeup and everything, we sat down and were waiting. And I took the opportunity to say, I have something that I want to talk with you about. And it was in a kind of cafeteria style room where they weren't providing food because it was after hours, but we were sitting at a table and a gentleman was sitting at the next table with a child. And I'm telling them what my preferences at end of life are, because it's a very relaxed situation. Everybody's happy. The nephews had a good performance, da 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 da. And not only was my family listening, at one point I noticed the guy at the next table was in our conversation too. And I laughed because he was listening. It was almost as if he was dumbfounded. It's like, what?
That knowledge is infectious, though, and the need and the desire to have these conversations. You're debunking a myth right now, right? That we don't have these types of conversations and that we aren't talking about in our families. And I love the fact that we're doing this in different ways, in different places and spaces, and not just at the end. Like, we can be proactive as a family, and that can feel really empowering. And I wish people would tap into that.
One thing we encourage, my colleague in this training that we do, she works with university students. She teaches several courses at the University of Michigan. Well, several classes during courses at the University of Michigan. And she encourages, when she's working in the fall term, She encourages the students to go home for the holidays and kind of ease the family into a conversation around the turkey and dressing. You know, we're sitting here, and you don't have to go straight for the jugular. You can slide into the conversation and make it, entertaining. Just kind of go over in there where and kids are creative, so they could come up with any kind of plan. But start the conversation, even if you don't end the conversation.
Right.
Normalize the possibility of having the conversation so that it doesn't take people by surprise. Well, it's like me. Diane preaches about death all the time. Well, people know Diane preaches about death all the time, so they know that they can have those conversations with Diane. So if we find not just harsh ways to raise the topic, and as I said, you don't have to go for the jugular. You can just kind of, well, what do you think about this, that, or the other? I heard somebody talking about how this happened at school. Somebody talking about how they had a family member or something about COVID. And I heard these stories about COVID. What do you think about making plans, so you're not in that kind of situation? What do you think about, telling your family what you'd like to see happening? Those stories from COVID were pretty traumatic. What do you all think about it? And see where it goes. Like I said, you don't have to come up with a solution, but you normalize the possibility of discussing the topic.
Yeah.
Everything okay, Dr. Mo?
Everything is good. All is well.
Okay.
And, caregiving goes beyond the confines of the workday, right? Especially when
Exactly.
in medicine, for sure. So, and certainly for caregivers too, right? And
Yes.
that's why it may be hard to create some sort of balance, or because it's a dynamic balance, a dynamic equilibrium. But I want to talk a little bit about that. And I don't know if you already touched on it, but finding that balance as a caregiver. What resources are available for caregivers in order for them to feel cared for? What resources are you aware of, if any?
Well, there are support groups for caregivers. I know that that's possible through hospitals. Different kinds of disease processes have support groups for caregivers, but there are also support groups in the community, senior centers, churches, where people, if they don't have one, start one.
Right.
You're not the only caregiver in the church.
Right.
If several of you are caring for somebody, start a group where you have a place to do, if nothing else, to screen. But I think if you get the group started, you can call in people who are professionals who can talk to you about the different topics you're concerned about.
Right.
So you don't have to wait for the support system to appear. If you need help and other people need help, reach out and say, you all, let's get together. Share your experiences. AARP, I think, would be another organization where you could get information about caregiving. The, the Area Agency on Aging. They call it AAA in communities. They have information all over the country about caregiving and services that are available to people who need that support. And if they don't have the information, they have resources that you can use. So I think there are support systems out there. I think the barrier for us is that we don't tell our business.
Oh, say that again. The barrier to getting help is what? Asking for it.
Exactly. We don't tell our business.
Wow.
You're preaching, Doc, because that's really real, right? A closed mouth that's fed.
Right.
Gotta ask
we
for
don't
help.
tell our business. I remember long ago, as a counselor myself in ministry, I became clear about the fact that I needed to be straight before I tried to guide other people.
Mm,
So particularly as I was working at the bedside, I always had someone, I had spiritual direction, and I had my own counselor. I didn't see that as a failure so much as I saw that as guidance and support.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's the
when I
number one
talked
tip,
about
right?
that, I'm sorry,
I said that's the number one tip for caregivers is learning how to ask for
ask for
help
help,
support.
ask for help. But
Um,
what we're up against again is when my mother knew that I was getting that kind of support, and she decided she was going to go and try, talking to a counselor herself. She went there and came away from it and said, I'm not telling her all of my business. And that was the end of that. That
Wow.
is a barrier.
Wow. So I think that, yes to respite care, yes to,
Yes,
relying on family and building out that network of support, right? Just like the
yes,
patient has an ecosystem, the caregiver has to have an ecosystem. So
exactly.
defining who those people are, if you're going to be the primary person, okay, so who's your go-to people? Who's
Yeah,
Right,
got your back?
yeah.
And having that
exactly.
conversation with them as well, so that they know and that they can also take turns and support in ways that helps to share the load. Um,
And again, having the conversation before you
yes,
need the help.
Help.
having it
Having the
That's
before.
so
I
important. Have
love
the
that.
conversation before you need the help.
Yeah,
And,
I,
and and using the resources. Sorry, Ricky, let me jump in really quickly and say also that looking at resources for caregivers, right? Making
right.
sure you're taking care of your mind and your body, your spirit, and your
Mhm.
doctor's appointments. Because too often I think I see us care for others to the detriment of ourselves. And that's a
Exactly.
double tragedy.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah. I have a question just about hospice, Reverend Diane.
yes.
So how do you make the decision to do hospice in your home versus go to
Mhm.
a hospice center? Like, how do you help people make that decision to do it outside of the home?
Well, that's pretty easily made. Hospice is again done wherever the patient's home is, wherever the technical home is, so that more than 95% of people in hospice are in a home or in a nursing home or assisted living,
Got it.
depending
All
on.
right. So they're not necessarily in a hospice center because I know some hospitals.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
So most people are, because the funding for hospice is provided, let's say you have Medicare and you are in your home. Medicare will cover all of the staff who come to see you, all of the medications that you take that are connected to hospice, all of the things you need because of your disease process that is hospice related, like a hospital bed, oxygen, and of course, all those medications. If you go to a hospice facility, the medical things are taken care of, but your room and board will not be taken care of. So if you're in a hospice facility, you're going to pay for that out of pocket.
Got it. Okay, that helps a lot. I didn't know that, but that's
Yes, yes, you're going to pay out of pocket. If you're in a nursing home, then you're in the nursing home, and hospice, depending on which coverage you have, Medicare and Medicaid, then again, room and board is separate from the medical support you're getting for the hospice in terms of hospice care. So I think when in the end, the home, whatever that is, and where you receive hospice will be dictated by the coverage that you have. There are some insurances, I lived in Michigan, and there used to be the big three, and they had health insurance coverage that would also cover hospice. That's done away with now. But some people had level 5 health insurance, and hospice was something covered by the big three's health insurance. There are health insurance policies for people working in certain areas, in certain fields, certain companies that will include hospice coverage. but that depends on the policy. So
Yeah, and the level of care that you need,
and the level of
I
care that
remember,
you
and
need.
my grandmother, she said, listen, she said, I don't want to die in here. She was in a nursing home because of the level of care that she needed. And
Right,
she explicitly told her, she said, I want to die at home. Get me
right,
home.
right,
And so we got the hospital bed, we got the oxygen tank, we did,
right,
we got an IV pole and whatever else. And those things were rented, right? You don't have to
right,
buy all that stuff. There's
right.
rental companies you can rent from. And we got her home because that was her wishes. And hospice moved heaven and earth to get her there. And she died the next day.
Yeah,
The next day. But that day and that night, she spent in her house surrounded by her family and her loved ones. And
mhm.
that's what she wanted. And that's
That's what
my
she wanted.
that's what I tell patients about hospice. That's my experience, is that it helps you to accomplish your wishes, because dying with dignity is so important, because cancer can
Yes,
rob you of so much of that dignity, right?
right,
And
right, right.
being able to transition the way that you want, surrounded by the people that you want,
Mhm.
is really, is powerful, and it's
Right.
not surrender at all, it's power.
It is, because it's your, on your terms, your choice on your terms. And so we had a patient once who came to our facility when I was working at the bedside, came to our facility, and it was not Angela Hospice where I am now. And she refused pain medication.
Wow.
And so people were wondering, well, what was she doing with hospice? Ultimately, she wanted to have the choice to get the care she was willing to take, and to say no to care she did not want to have. And so that's why she came to a facility, to get the kind of care she wanted to have. And that is basically what happens with hospice. You get the care that you agree to based on the diagnoses and what we would offer for someone with your medical concerns.
All right, so as we round out the hour, top five
Oh my
tips.
gosh,
I
time
know
has flown.
Oh,
it
right?
goes fast.
Oh my
Give
gosh.
me top five tips for caregivers this
Yeah.
month, whether it's tips for them or for the people that they're caring for. What's some things that they should remember that we can put in the chat? I know I got the floating hands here, but if you got maybe five things that people should remember this month, what might they be?
For caregivers, go to your doctor's appointments, go to your medical appointments, whatever those appointments are that help you take care of yourself. Number two, ask for help. Whether you're in an emergency, the person's on hospice in the home, and you don't know what to do, call. Hospice is a 24/7 service, so call and get help. Number three, have those conversations, sit down with your family, have the conversations before you have to have them. Number four, I would say, accept that you will not do everything perfectly. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. You are not the medical professional. You won't do everything perfectly. The medical professionals don't do that. Give yourself a break and get support. Get, I'm sorry?
And get what? I'm sorry.
Support. Get support. Get support somewhere.
Self-care is not selfish.
It is not.
Yeah.
You have to get help. For people of faith, even Jesus said, let's separate from the noise and go over here and rest for a while. People were clamoring all around him. They were about to envelop him in their needs. And he said, let's step away from the clamor and rest for a while. Do that.
That's
No,
so
that's more
powerful.
about the caregiver than the patient, sorry.
That's okay. This show is dedicated to those who are providing care this month, as is the month, right?
Yeah,
This month
yeah,
is dedicated to acknowledging those needs and telling you that we see you. Even
yes,
when, and I can remember
yes.
times when my grandmother was disagreeable and just downright mean,
Oh, yeah,
right? Because she
mhm,
didn't expect to be in a position to need such care. And it made her
exactly.
feel defeated. And it's hard to be the caregiver when somebody you care for is mean to you, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
But this month is for the caregivers, and we see you and we love you, we support you, and we're grateful as an oncologist. I'm grateful for the folks who continue to show up at the appointments and ask the questions and take the notes. And you know,
exactly,
it means everything to have you part of the team, not the afterthought, but you are just as important as everybody else on that medical team. You are just as
exactly.
important.
Because
Yeah.
you're there.
Yep. Yep. Just as important. And you're
Yes,
there when we're not there. When I don't see what's
exactly,
going on, you're my
Right.
eyes and my ears. Yeah. So
exactly.
we're grateful. You're right, Ricky.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you so much. You're so
You are welcome. I
Ah,
enjoyed this immensely. One of my favorite topics, much to my family's chagrin.
awesome.
we enjoyed having you. You made it an easy topic for us to talk about, and hopefully people will share this so that you can talk about it on your social media pages. Click the share button, share it with your family, friends, share it through you can text it to people, you can post it, it's on YouTube. We want to have the conversations about end of life before end of life so that
Yes.
we can, be and feel prepared. So, wow, what do we have? I don't know what we have next week, Ricky.
I don't know. Let me see. I know we're,
Whatever it is, it's going to be good.
I know we're,
Uh,
I believe that. I believe that. You all
well,
do
we
a
got great
wonderful
guests like
job.
you.
I know
We got
every,
great guests like you. So that makes it worthwhile. But
yeah.
thank you all for your comments and participating in the chat. You're right. Caregivers need care. And to those of you who are caregivers, in the chat, we see you and we value you for watching. We hope it's been relatable and reliable and real. That's what we do every Wednesday night here on blackdoctor.org. And we thank our sponsors and
Black Doctor. Yeah, next week we're talking about the wisdom study 2.0.
awesome.
Oh,
Awesome. So
Yeah.
tune in for some wisdom and a
Yeah.
clinical trial that you do not have to have cancer to be a part of. In fact, you can't have cancer to be a part of it.
Right.
So
Yeah. And Reverend Diane, you're now part of our family. We don't let people go once you join us.
okay.
it's
I'll
true.
remember.
You'll
We'll
stuck
be
with
glad
us.
to have you back. Absolutely. Okay. To have this conversation
Okay.
again, how to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So we love
Okay.
it.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. This has been a pleasure. I wish you
All right.
well.
The doctor's in.
Doctor's in. Breasty love. Breasty love. See you soon. Breasty love.
Bye-bye.
Bye.